This week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast is brought to you by the Wandering Tavern.
We have a series of guilds that have just been released, the Monster Hunting Guilds.
Game design is a precise science.
Game design is so far from precise.
The kind of psionic subclasses are making their way into the core next 5th edition Player's Handbook.
We're really close to text and art lock on Player's Handbook.
There's no differentiation between psionics and magic.
I'll use the 3 Fs. Fun, flavorful, and frigging balanced.
Spirit Guardians. Damn it!
Wait a minute. I want to give them some credit here. Let me talk you through the 4 level up abilities Great Old One gets.
All that and more, Dante says, right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms. That's right, it is time for a dice picnic. We're going to take a moment to take a breath. Let's get our little rug out. Let's get our snacks out from the picnic basket. My name's Ben Byrne. If you've never listened to this podcast before, I am joined by James Hake, Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill. We got a question here from Nananro, who emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com and wanted to know, if you were on the ABC show Hard Quiz, what would be your expert topic?
I think it would have to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I'd have to do one of those, you know how there's that danger where like some people come on with like a really narrow subject as their expert thing. They're like, this specific day in 1920s New York or whatever, right? Like
Sure.
They really narrow it down.
Yeah.
I would kind of have to do that because otherwise you're going to start getting bull raw. I didn't curse Dante. You'd start getting bull raw questions about like, I don't know, one of the producers on the original movie or one of the comic book artists. And it's like, I'm not here for that. Ask me questions about my television series and I got you.
Shawn Merwin, what about yourself? What would you be an expert in?
English grammar as per the Chicago Manual of Style. That's how I party, folks, right there.
Woo!
Yeah.
I have no further questions because I feel incapable of asking them.
Mission accomplished.
James Hake, what would you expertise in?
I missed the question, but let me see if let me rephrase it based on context and see if I get it right. I understand you're asking me, what could I give a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation on at the drop of a hat?
So close.
Very close. Let's assume that's the question.
Okay. See, I'll answer that question. I could give probably a 15-minute to half-hour PowerPoint presentation on obscure minutia of the lore of Legend of Zelda at the drop of a hat. You could name any game in that series, any single one, and I could probably fill up 20 minutes easily with one game alone on just weird niche trivia.
Are you the person, because I've played, what Zeldas have I played? Mainly Game Boy ones from like way back in the day, right?
Like Link's Awakening?
Link's Awakening, yes.
Yeah.
Also, Oracle of Seasons was the one that I had, which I really liked. I think I played that till completion.
Oracle of Seasons is one of my weaknesses. It's one of the only ones I've never played.
I feel like it is a more niche one as well. But the question I have is with Breath of the Wild. I got dumped into Breath of the Wild. And I was like, it's this vast, beautiful world. Look at all these things. But then like a year after like not playing Breath of the Wild, I found a YouTube video that was like, here are all the things in Breath of the Wild that link to previous Zelda games. Are you the person who was like wandering through going like, it's that thing?
Yes. So I had an amazing revelation. This will interest 2 people on the planet. I had an amazing revelation the other day while I was revisiting the first Zelda game I ever played, the Minish Cap for Game Boy Advance. There's a region in there called the Castor Wilds. It's like this big swampland you have to get, you go through to go to a dungeon. And I was watching a video about speedrunning the Minish Cap. And most speedrunners play in Japanese because the text is more concise, character for character.
Sure.
And so I saw for the first time that region had been renamed from Japanese to English. It's not Castor in Japanese. It's Tabanta, which is referenced in Breath of the Wild a lot of the time. The wheat in Hyrule is called Tabantha wheat. And so it comes from a localized name that was changed in English that English speakers no longer understand because of translators in 2001.
Yeah, I think James is going to win the hard quiz.
Yeah, yes, likely so. But the host will give him plenty of jabs.
Guff. Yeah.
I can't remember the host's name off the top of my head, but for context,
Tom Gleason.
Gleason. I wanted to say Tom Gleisner, but that's Have You Been Paying Attention? Separate Australian game
The
show.
other one.
Comedy
It's the
thing.
other Tom. There's now 3 Australian presenter Toms. I think it's too many.
It's like having Chris's
Give me
in
one of their
the Marvel
jobs.
universe. Yeah.
It's like having too many Jameses in RPGs. We should fight to the death.
Change your name to Tom and you've got a shot.
Also, I just want to put this out there. Chris Perkins, I couldn't tell if you were joking or not when you said you didn't have a sense of smell. I don't have a sense of smell. Let's start an anonymous in the Tabletop RPG Industry Guild. Speaking of guilds, we have a series of guilds that have just been released. The Monster Hunting Guilds of the Monster Hunter class, which has entered its second playtest phase. For folks not in the know, the Monster Hunter first appeared on the Ghostfire Gaming blog 18 months ago, 2 years ago, almost at this point when the first level was posted. It has been through a playtest period, and Shawn Merwin and myself have recently pulled it apart, gone through the playtest feedback that we got from that, put it back together, reconstructed the class. Shawn, for folks not in the know, how would you pitch the Monster Hunter? What is the core fantasy of that class?
The Monster Hunter is a really, really, really smart martial character who knows so much about monsters that they can do superhuman things to monsters and help their allies do those same things to those monsters that they are most expert in hunting.
Indeed. Sorry, I was reading the chat. That's why I was slightly blah, blah.
You're like, I don't have to pay attention because I wrote it. That's what you're like.
Well, I wrote it too, and I'm going through my notes going, wait, what does this class do?
What does it do?
This was last week. What do I know?
It is in open playtest now. I'm just going to drop a link in the chat super quickly. And if you're watching this through another platform, you will be able to see it. The link will be around the place. Basically, if you want to access the open beta, I suppose, or the open playtest, or the closed playtest, I guess it is, you can sign up for our Discord. It's only $1 to sign up for the Grim Hollow VIP playtesters Discord. We're going to be playtesting a whole bunch of things over the year leading up to October when the next Grim Hollow Kickstarter is, including Heritages, which is an exciting one that I'm excited for in the future. But I wanted to ask you, Shawn, because, you know, we had the original Monster Hunter class that people may know and love. And then I handed it over and I said, break my baby apart and put it back together. What are some of the main changes from the original playtest to what we've come up with, and why were some of those changes made?
The biggest change was removing anything that linked back to some stuff like salvage. Anything that wasn't specifically covered in the core 5e rules, we wanted to rebuild so we at least knew that this where we're starting, everyone knows. You don't have to know Grim Hollow. You don't have to know the salvage system from the Monster Grimoire. You can just play this as a class that could be played anywhere. We do sprinkle in flavor from Grim Hollow, but you don't need to know any of those rules. That's I think the most important thing that we tried to do. And then it was just take some of the lessons we think we're learning from the playtest of the 2024 5th edition rules and slowly massage those in, hoping that we have learned the correct lessons from what we've seen. We are, of course, ready to pivot. And when we do start seeing some final versions of the new class rules and subclass rules, then we will be ready to pivot and make changes to make sure that we're in line with that.
Game design is a precise science.
Game design is so far from precise because there are so many wrong answers and so many right answers that someone will think is wrong.
Yeah.
That there's so many things that you could do. The question is, what should you do? And that's where we're trying to get. We're trying to get away from the could. We could do this. We could do that. We could do a lot of things to get to what should we do. We're chipping away that stone and trying to find the statue inside it.
Well, that's the discussion point, I suppose, is like, and the thing that we want to show people is the design process, the game design process through the Monster Hunter class. Because I'm learning a lot right now as someone who hasn't play tested a lot of things before, hasn't designed a lot of things that have then gone out to public play testing before. I'm learning exactly what you're describing, which is we have our Discord now where people can access it. It's popping off. It's gotten to the point I can't keep up with the conversation anymore, which is great. That's really fantastic. But getting a lot of comments about like, have you considered this? Have you thought of that? This combination would make it OP. I don't think it's strong enough. We've got so many comments that say it's underpowered and so many equal comments that say it's overpowered, and kind of getting through that noise and finding because every comment is welcome. Every discussion point is welcome. We want to consider it from every angle, but finding, I don't know, the truth, if the truth exists. Right. And of course you can't know anything until it's play tested, really, which is something I learned recently. We play tested it at Conquest in Australia, which was a local convention around Easter. And the big new feature that's been added is studied response, which is that idea of, Bard the bowman who waits until the exact perfect moment to shoot Smog in his weak point in his underbelly. The monster hunter can wait for a monster to attack, and then as a reaction, make an attack before a weapon attack before the monster executes its attack. And it sort of represents that moment of like, its jaws open and I shoot it in the mouth, or I see its weak point exposed. This didn't occur to me until playtesting, but we realized that a party member can step away from a monster, triggering an attack of opportunity, which then triggered the monster hunter to attack it. And there was this moment of like, oh, that's actually cool. That's a lot of fun. Not how I had thought of it being used, but it's fun finding those things in playtest.
Yeah. And we're getting questions like, have you thought about this feat that because of an opportunity attack lets you? Yes, we thought of that. Have you thought of? Yes, we've thought of that too. Sometimes we know that it might not work, but we know that it might. So that's why we want you to play with it. I played this weekend a 5th level version of the Monster Hunter, like the Carver subclass, at a table. And I thought, okay, this is fun. And we got into it. And then the cleric cast Spirit Guardians and basically took down a whole army of giants in, several rounds as the giants come running, and they blender. And I'm like, I don't think this is broken. I don't think anything I'm doing is broken. Ever.
No,
it's like a fireball that just constantly goes off. We try to look for those corner cases, but also look at it holistically in its place amongst the other classes.
I saw Joe Rasso, who you were playing with, post about Spirit Guardians. I'm assuming this exact situation on Twitter. Spirit Guard, I think I've talked about it before. It's my absolute rage button. I don't think the spell's overpowered necessarily, but in the first campaign I played, there was a cleric, and every time, every battle, it always blindsided me. It always caught me off guard. I was like, you're surrounded. What are you going to do now? Spirit Guardians. Damn it!
Well, the challenge is always, when you make a new class especially, is to make something that's, I'll use the 3 Fs, fun, flavorful, and frigging balanced. And hit all those notes with the understanding that you also want this to do something different. You don't want this to be just a fighter who has one extra trick. And so we didn't want to give extra attack because we wanted there to be something else that this class could do while still keeping up with a fighter's damage. Give it a different way to do that damage. And that different way is with a studied response, as well as with expert strike, which doesn't give an extra attack, but it gives extra damage and a bonus to hit, which will, I hope, when you run math numbers on it, as opposed to other numbers, I suppose, not math numbers, even out to say, well, you're hitting 15% more of the time and doing this many extra points of damage, which in the long run would equal an extra attack that a normal fighter would have.
Well, you bring up a really interesting point here, Shawn, that I always think of when I go into player option balance, which is the dichotomy of skill ceiling versus numerical balance overall, right? Because if we look at a champion fighter, that is not necessarily a hard class to play, but it still hits a pretty good benchmark for numerical power. And one of the things that clearly you want for the Monster Hunter is you want to be very thoughtful and your thoughtfulness to be rewarded in play. And so how do you reward that thoughtfulness without making it feel like, you know, you're doing all of this extra work. What's that meme with like the guy doing kick flips on a skateboard just to faceplant on a rake at the bottom of the stairs anyway, right? It's like you don't want to do all this extra work to just get the same benefit as you would for playing a champion, to just walk in, 3 attacks, I crit more on a 19, you know? What do you think about that, going into that kind of, you know, play versus outcome design?
I think if I pick up what you're laying down here, you want the complexity to fit the player, but not add anything too much to the game, if that makes sense. So yes, I want the player of the Monster Hunter to think tactically, but I don't want that tactical thinking to just necessarily overwhelm the game or be so obvious.
Do you want to, sorry, I'm interrupting here, but do you want to reward the harder class to play, so to speak, by making it a little bit stronger than the easier class to play?
No, because the more complicated you make something, the easier it will be for people who really think to break it. To combine it with this class and this feat and this. And so, in fact, I want to do it the opposite, right? I want to make the more complex things a little weaker so that when it is picked up, and we know that you can multi-class with the rogue here.
Yeah.
If you can still get more than one sneak attack in a round, if you get one per turn, if we go back to the 2014 book, then having a reaction that can happen at any point gives you a sneak attack at that point. Now, if they stick with the only once per round rather than once per turn, then that's not as big a deal. But if it is, then we're going to see everybody take 3 levels of Monster Hunter and then put the Rogue and Paladin on top of that. And here we go with 2 sneak attacks, pretty much guaranteed. Not guaranteed, but more likely.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you bring up that I find interesting is, you know, there's a lot of like different thoughts I have about the Monster Hunter, about where we should slot different abilities and how those abilities interact. A lot of people have pointed out studied response is the 2nd level feature currently. And it is a powerful feature for a 2-level dip, right? A Paladin could take a 2-level dip into Monster Hunter and then be able to smite on a reaction. And you're getting that reaction attack. It's a little bit conditional, like Sneak Attack is, like Divine Smite is with needing a spell slot, like Raging is with the ways that you can lose rage. It's a little bit conditional. But then again, in the playtesting, while monsters can do spells or like breath weapons, 80% of the time, I think, they're attacking, you know, like they make an attack action. That's what they do. And so you're functionally getting multi-attack at 2nd level. It's just that 2nd attack happens somewhere else in the round. And so in my thinking, I'm like, if only there was a way, I say this like, you know, but big game design's a puzzle. I say this like I'm not inventing it. If only there was a way to move studied response to 5th level, it might be a little bit more on par with when other martial classes get multi-attack. The reason that's not the case at the moment is because the subclasses, like the Carver at 3rd level, rely on studied response for their features. Maybe we'll change that around. But the point that I'm coming to is like, yeah, we're aware of these different things where it might be a little bit, you know, squirrely, to go into that word again. But we want to see if that's actually a problem on the table, you know?
Right.
And where that creates opportunity on the table as well, like I said, with the attack of opportunity that the monster makes, triggering studied response.
Yep. And we've been through several iterations already, right? We've been through iterations where monster hunters do lots of extra dice of damage, but we got rid of that. We've been through iterations where there are very, very, very specific points where the monster hunter can be great, but then we thought, well, that's too specific. We don't want people hunting, no pun intended, for those opportunities constantly. We want them to be able to play it a little more straightforward and not have to get that tactical. So that, you know, that's the trade-off. And it's a fun process, and I hope people enjoy it. And, you know, go into the Discord and debate. And I am reading it, but I'm not going to be responding to too many things because I want to see it in our playtest forum. Tell us how many levels you played. What level did you play it at? Those are the things that we need data on so we can make the correct choices based on real experience from players playing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing that I want to try to remind the Discord is please continue the conversation. Please continue like getting excited with each other, suggesting different combinations, talking about the subclasses which you prefer. While I love reading through that conversation and going like, oh yeah, maybe that or this, that's not necessarily going to be accounted for in the playtest feedback kind of iteration unless it's in the feedback form. There's a link to the feedback form in the playtest document itself. It's also pinned in the Discord. So there's plenty of ways to get access to it, but just make sure that feedback goes into the feedback form so that we definitely see it. Otherwise, it might get lost in the... I woke up this morning, looked at the Discord, and I was like, oh, no, this has gotten out of hand. So, yes.
Oh, no. My thing is popular. People are talking about it. This whole episode, I'm just going to do impressions of you.
Well, this was when I woke up and came into the office, I told everybody that I feel like Anakin Skywalker when he first boots up his pod racer, seeing the Discord start to fill up where I'm like, it's working! It's working! So, yeah. Next, we've got to get it to the track, but we're on the way. Speaking of classes, there was a new video from the D&D YouTube channel, or it might have been the D&D Beyond one. I'll be honest, they blur together for me. But it was Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins talking about the new player's handbook, giving a little bit of a sneaky peek inside. There you go, Dael, do an impression.
Do I need to?
Yeah,
I feel like you just did an impression of an impression.
Yeah, that's fair.
Little sneaky peek inside. It's my least favorite of the voices.
They talked about, I didn't watch the full video. I will cop to here. I'm not sure if any of you did, but the big pull out seeming to be that the Psi Warrior and the Soul Knife Rogue, the kind of psionic subclasses, are making their way into the core next 5th edition player's handbook.
James did the homework. Let's make them talk about it.
If I'm going to be real with you, that was kind of the heft of the video. Even Todd kind of like gently apologized at the end of the video, being like, yeah, well, you know, next video, the player's handbook is going to be locked and we'll talk your ear off about it. We'll talk for hours and hours about it, about everything in it. So it does seem like that this video was just kind of getting one out for the sake of getting one out there.
Yeah.
And that Wizards of the Coast, the D&D team, is up to their eyeballs in galley reviews. I guess that was the other major bit of information there, is that the player's handbook is in the phase of development, which is called print reviews or galley reviews, which means they have a full draft that they consider acceptable done. They've rolled it off the presses in their in-house print machine, and the entire team is going over it at one point or another with a red pen, and they're doing however many rounds of it takes to discover what works, what doesn't, and what can be changed at this late hour before sending the final file off to the printer. So we're really close. We're really close to text and art lock on Player's Handbook, if what they're saying is any indication.
So you said Psi Warrior, and what was the other one?
The Psi Warrior Fighter, which appeared in Tasha's. That's going in instead of the Brawler from the 1D&D playtests, which didn't make it. Sorry, Brawler. And the Soul Knife Rogue, which thinks a dagger into their hand. They're like, oh, if I have, is this a dagger I see before me? If I have, then it is.
I'm going to grab it.
Yeah, exactly. Should I clutch the blade? But then they're also talking about how they wanted to put them in because thematically they link with the Aberrant Sorcerer and the Great Old One, Warlock Pact.
Okay.
So more connection between psionics and aberrations.
Interesting. Because I was going to say, because it's like, I understand them ditching the Brawler. I felt like I was like the last person standing in the Brawler's corner. But
I could do this all day.
The Brawler is me. But I was a little surprised that they would replace it with the Psi Warrior, not because it's unpopular or anything like that, but just because it seems like such a niche concept. And I mean, this all just reveals too much about me that I'm like pro Brawler, and the Psi Warrior is one of my least favorite fighter subclasses.
Why?
But I suppose why?
Yeah.
Because for me, it feels so distant from the core of what this class is and represents to me.
Mhm.
It feels like at that point, it's just like, I don't know, play something else, play a spell sword kind of a thing. Like it feels like it is not a fighter to me. It feels like it's something else, but that's been given a sword.
Mhm.
And so it's really just a flavor thing more than anything. I understand people loving it. I'm just like, for me, it's like surprising that you would make it one of the core.
Well, that's why I bring it up. Just
I think it is interesting seeing it in this lineup of psionic subclasses. I think that does make it fit more.
Yes. Yeah. Because for me, when Tasha's came out, the Psi Warrior felt like, and again, this is from a GM perspective, seeing the options that players would choose. I was seeing, if I ever saw a fighter, they were a battle master. You know, Eldritch Knight, very rarely. Champion, if they were a first-time player, but I think people get past the champion relatively quickly, assuming it's not just the subclass you love.
Irrelevant, so we'll come back round to them.
Sure. But the Psi Warrior seemed to unlock an interesting non-battle master fighter that had things in its toolbox that didn't feel, you know, the Eldritch Knight felt like two classes in one class, a fighter and a wizard, kind of like
which was frustrating as well, because it felt like it wasn't super good at being either.
No, exactly.
They don't merge.
Be like one, I don't know.
Whereas the Psi Warrior kind of felt like that spell sword fantasy really strongly, but more than that, it felt like a fighter that you could take and feel like you had other things that you could do other than just like hit monster in combat.
I'm with you on that, Ben, because my frustration with the Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster from the very beginning of 5e is that the two systems of martial fighting and spell casting, they don't ever really interact. And when I think of a spell sword in fiction, I think of someone who is, you know, swinging their sword and all of a sudden it alights with flame, or like they throw the sword and then they teleport to it and they yank it out of the goblin they just threw it into and they keep fighting over there, right? The spell attacks and the swordsmanship are two sides of the same coin. They're working in tandem. Whereas if you're playing an Eldritch Knight, it's like, I'm going to either swing my sword and cast a cantrip or I'm going to cast a spell, right? They don't connect. Whereas other classes like the Psionic Warrior, or maybe even Blade Lock. I've never played a Blade Lock enough to say that for sure, but like Paladin Smites, for example, that's a merge of spellcasting and swordsmanship that does cool stuff along the lines of what I'm looking for.
Blade Lock's great too, for the record.
Nice.
I think it fulfills that Gish kind of feeling a lot better than the Eldritch Knight does. You know,
So do we need, instead of subclasses, do we need regular classes and then one class for every combination of two regular classes?
Or just a psionic class that has subclasses that are...
Subclasses that have,
Well, maybe Daggerheart got it right.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'll be honest, in a setting where magic exists, there is no differentiation to psionics for me personally. Like, wizards think about their spells as well.
Well, because I think for that reason, I have very rarely been a fan of psionic subclasses. The one that sticks out as one that I instantly loved, I need you to prepare yourselves. It's the Grim Hollow Monk Way of the Leaden Crown. So praise to the Ghostfire team for that one, because it really is. Do you know where to point?
Yeah, I'm trying to point over James and Dael's heads to Shawn.
Yeah. No, it's the first time I've read a psionic subclass. I was like, that feels psionic. That one feels really, really cool. It felt like, oh, this is Darth Vader. And, you know, like I've said many times before, I very rarely come to, a piece of TTRPG stuff and think, I don't want to make any changes to this. That's one that stands out in my memory as like, nailed it.
I agree. As the person who did not at all write the Psionic Monk or the Way of the Leaden Crown, is that its features feel of the body and of the mind in the way that it uses its mind to do kind of physical things, but the soul knife in particular, like summons a blade into its hand, like that could be magic, that could be mind. Like it doesn't. There's no differentiation. May as well just really.
Be a knife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I like the idea
no
of
one's tracking, drawing your daggers either. So it's like,
well, don't get me wrong.
Just be a knife.
I like the idea of like a rogue who throws like shadows, you know, that kind of take the shape of blades and stuff. But like, I don't think that it needs to be. That could be
a blink back belt. Like,
sure.
There's a great spell called Shadow Blade that even does that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
I think
any number of ways of achieving that.
Unless you're setting something like Mass Effect, where it says specifically that like the magic of Mass Effect is psionics, and that is how biotics work. There's no differentiation between psionics and magic. Especially that they threw the Pact of the Old One Warlock in there as like a psionic class. I'm like, no, it's not.
I was side-eyeing as well.
That you're just saying that.
It's just weird stuff. It's just goopy weird stuff that you throw together, and then at the end, I'm like, that's kind of psionic, I guess.
That being said, you know, for making yucks at Psionics expense, yucks is in last.
Now, okay, wait a minute. I want to give them some credit here. Let me talk you through the 4 level up abilities Great Old One gets. At first level, Awakened Mind. Your alien knowledge gives you the ability to touch the minds of other creatures.
That's the one that I thought was psionic.
Entropic Ward. Thought Shield. Your thoughts can't be read by telepathy or other means unless you allow it. And Create Thrall. You infect a humanoid's mind with the alien magic of your patron.
Oh, that one feels like a stretch, but okay.
It is. It is.
I'll give you 2.5.
And I will say, I am excited. Like, I think the Soul Knife and the Psi Warrior are great inclusions. You know, I don't know if the Psi Warrior is necessarily better from the Brawler than the Brawler from a conceptual level, as opposed to like how the rules functioned. But I think that
I will admit right now, I think it is more
inclusions.
fun from a conceptual perspective.
Sure.
I don't know if it's stronger from a conceptual perspective. I think it is stronger to have a Brawler class, but I will say it would be more fun to be like, I'm a psionic warrior. Like, I
specifically
get it.
like that.
Yeah, that's how you talk if you play it. It's actually a rule. They've written it in. When you play the psionic warrior, you have to speak like this, like you're from a Homestar Runner animation. I want to talk about. Okay, this is not strictly relevant. So Dante. But recently, my sister played her first ever D&D game.
Woohoo!
And this is like the last family member that was a holdout who hadn't played D&D. This is the sister who was she was the last one in the Brawler's Corner. No, this was the sister who was so upset when I explained how magic works in D&D. Okay, that's who we're talking about. But she was playing her first D&D game the other day. I was not there. I wasn't involved, but I was helping her make her character. And it was a 6th level character that we had to make. For her first ever time, no background understanding of D&D, nothing to work on. And it went really, really well. And so this is why I wanted to talk about this idea of like, oh, well, we have these bland classes like the champion fighter so that the first time players can, you know, have an easy time.
Sure.
But the flaw with that is, okay, you've got a new player. She's barely interested in playing her first game of D&D. You're like, I have got to take this tiny little spark of being interested and I have to nurture it. Yeah. So we begin with the stipulation from the DM is 6th level characters. It's Emu Wars is the one-shot concept.
Fun.
And they have to play humans. And already I'm in trouble because Rayward specifically said to me that she wants to play the Magic Pudding. I was like, we could do that. And then I read this and I'm like, oh, they have to be human? Okay. You were a pudding who was turned into a human. All right, great. That you were cursed to be turned into a human. You're in human shape, but really you're a pudding. Great. And then like during this little interview with her, she's like, I just want to be able to do some cool magic stuff. And I want to be a little like curmudgeonly escape artist. So I'm trying to figure out how do we do this. I end up making her a drunken master monk, 6th level. So now she's got, and I give her because she's variant human, a magic initiate feat. So she has magic. She has a bunch of key points and this like meta currency to deal with as well. There's like all these complicated elements, but it went really well. She came home from the game and she said, that was great. I felt like I always had something nifty I could do. Never have I received such high praise for character creation. But basically the key ended up being I just rearranged, rather than giving her the character sheet as written and explaining how the character sheet is read and how all of it works, I just rearranged it. I didn't want to have to teach her about bonus actions and actions and reactions, because that I was there for the discussion of how magic works. And so I was like, okay, what I'm going to write down is a couple of combo options that all fit within those parameters. And you can choose between the combo options. I handed her tokens instead of explaining key points. If you want to do this, it costs 1 token. Done. Her spells that I gave her, thankfully, Magic Initiate, 2 cantrips that she can use as many times as she wants, so she doesn't have to track spell slots, and then 1 spell, Magic Missile, that is just like a nice little flashy thing that you can do exactly once. And it went so well. So I don't know, I'm once again finding myself resisting this concept of you have to give a bland thing to a player. You gotta nurture the spark of inspiration. You have to give them the thing that they are interested in. It's a matter of finding a way to present that information to them in a way that isn't overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. So the books will come with 1 Dael Kingsmill per purchase, who will nurture the spark of new players buying these books. Thank you, Dael. That's very kind of you.
But do not feed her after midnight.
No.
Speaking of the spark of inspiration, this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast has a sponsor, and I'm really excited about this sponsor because it is a tabletop RPG sponsor.
Woo, woo, woo!
The Wandering Tavern. I'm just throwing a link to their Kickstarter page in the chat, or there'll be links around the place. The Wandering Tavern is a tabletop RPG Kickstarter, a 180-plus page guide into an expansive Studio Ghibli-inspired floating city, basically. It kind of looks like Howl's Moving Castle, but it's in the sky.
Look at that.
And it looks like
map.
It's about 7 times bigger. Yeah, there's a map of the entire city that you get, combat maps of the entire city to explore every nook and cranny.
All the different sections as well. They say somewhere in there that that major inspirations for it were the Ghibli movies. So you've got your Howl's Moving Castle, your Spirited Away, kind of those like weird little intricate windy kind of the bathhouse vibes and the vibes of the moving castle. It's just like you totally see it in the map.
And yet it's got this sort of darkest dungeon art style. I like this tab that says R-rated over a blurry picture of like a potion.
What I love about it is this idea, speaking of Ghibli-esque, is of spirits mechanics. Basically, at night in the Wandering Tavern, spirits come out from the darkness corners, and they can be spoken to. They can be friendly. There's something very, very whimsical about it, but they can also be dangerous and cause conflict on the Wandering Tavern. I love that idea of that adding an extra layer of like, yeah, when the sun goes down, everybody gets inside. You can explore if you want to, but you're at risk of, becoming one of the spirits.
Minecraft laws.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is no one mentioning the recipes from a top-rated chef?
Oh, I thought this was amazing.
Is it
I
just
thought this was an amazing inclusion. Well, real recipes too. Like for you can dine in the taverns on the Wandering Tavern. Sorry, you can dine in the restaurants on the Wandering Tavern with the real recipes that you have. The 13 real recipes that you can cook up for your D&D group. Have a cook up. Have a dinner party with your D&D game. 30 plot hooks with 33 NPCs that set up a variety of like adventures that lead into the dark corners of the Wandering Tavern. Anything from deep, dark, forgotten secrets, rebellions, black market empires, personal rivalries. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, this looks rad. I think I'm going to back this at some level.
It looks like something. What I love about it is A, it's an airship. I love airships. But B, you could play an entire campaign around this, or you could drop it into an existing campaign world, kind of like Howl's Moving Castle in the distance. There's stories about it. You seed information about it into your campaign. And then the players, it can just be like a returning place that they come back to. It floats around in the background. They engage with it fully and start exploring it for a while before they go off and do something else. Could be like the capital city of your world setting that kind of floats around the country instead of staying in one spot. There's no limit to the things that you could, use this for within your campaign. So
I might import this into Daggerheart.
Ooh.
A cool idea. It does say that it is system agnostic. There's 5e stats for everything that you can use optionally, but it is intended to be system agnostic. So importing it into Daggerheart might be perfect.
Very nice.
So it is called The Wandering Tavern. It's on Kickstarter right now. If you're listening to this on YouTube or Spotify, it might be in its final days. I think there's 9 days from now, possibly 7 days from by the time this goes on air. So you don't have that much time left. Check it out via the links that will be in the description or up there or all over the place. Roll20 is partnering with Discord so that they're partnering together so that you can start a VTT session inside a Discord call. No longer do you need to have a web browser and a Discord call open at the same time. You can do it all in Discord. The functionality will include full VTT support, integrated character sheets, 3D dice, all your current campaigns and marketplace purchases from Roll20, access to the modules for D&D, Pathfinder, Marvel, etc., built-in video and voice chat because it's a Discord call. And all you have to do is click on the little rocket ship inside of a Discord call to start the session, in theory. This seems cool.
A lot of people use Discord for D&D, so that's going to be handy. Everyone's using, what's it called, Avrade? The dice butt that exists there. So this will be handy as hell. Did you know that we got like a full halfway through the Dusk campaign before we found out Justice had been using Discord in browser the entire time?
I didn't know you could do that.
Bound away.
Well, I have good news for Justice because this functionality will work both in the Discord program app and in browser. So that option will still exist. Yeah. You want to be like Justice. The only place it won't function is in the mobile app, I believe. Too bad, so sad if you're playing on mobile, I guess.
So the get off your phone while we're playing the game rule still holds dominion.
Currently, this is open to Roll20 Pro subscribers. The beta will be starting on April 30th, which is tomorrow US time.
If it's Roll20, does that mean that it can handle other kinds of dice systems? Because Roll20 can handle other kinds of dice systems, right? Right?
It should.
In terms of,
it's like it plays not just standard, I don't know,
like Fate dice
games, like Fate dice. Thank you, Shawn.
I assume so. They say, as I've sort of mentioned, and I'm reading off a press release from an article.
You should check it out on Roll20 and find out for yourself.
Screw that.
Wow.
They're not a sponsor. Screw Roll20.
If you ever want to sponsor us.
Oh, actually, yeah. Wait, what am I saying?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Poisoning the well. It says that D&D, Pathfinder, Marvel, so are going to be compatible with this, module inside of Discord. So I assume that, and that 3D dice will be usable inside as well. So I assume that
3D dice.
Does Roll20 not already have that?
We're living like kings. Yeah, but this is Roll20 in Discord, Benjamin.
I want 4D dice. I want them to travel through time.
Oh,
in a world.
That'd be cool. You have to score a natural 20 at 4 o'clock exactly. Wouldn't that be cool if that's how the diviner worked? You roll your dice, or when you use your ability, 4 dice just appear out of nowhere on your rolled. And then in the future, you roll those dice and they'll pop back to your diviner in the past. Anyway, full release later this year. Check it out. I don't know. Roll20, call us. Speaking of calling things, I don't know. Let's blast through this one. Hasbro had an earnings call. If you really want to know the industry stuff, I don't mean to be dismissive, especially of people who are interested in this stuff, but I feel like we're getting really into the business minutia here. That isn't as relevant to people who are just enjoying the hobby,
Watch Mastering Dungeons. We talk about it this week.
Yeah, basically do that.
Teos has this all down.
Just very quickly, so you go into Mastering Dungeons primed and ready for Teos's analysis, which will be far more expert than ours, or at least mine at least. Hasbro's overall earnings in Q1 of this year, of 2024, are down 24%. That's Hasbro as a whole, as a company. But overall tabletop gaming, which includes Wizards of the Coast, but also includes Monopoly and other tabletop games, is up by 5%. on last year. Digital licensing and game sales, such as Baldur's Gate would be a licensing thing, are up by 14%, and Magic the Gathering was up by 4%. That's a lot of numbers, but what it means is that overall, Hasbro has dropped as a company, but tabletop is on the up and up. And Hasbro attributing the sales, the drop in their overall revenue, mainly to the fact that they sold off their film and TV business E1 last year. Magic the Gathering and the continued success of Baldur's Gate 3 earning a large amount of recognition for the bigger earnings in Q1 from the tabletop side of things, along with partnerships like Lego having dropped within that quarter, that being a licensing deal. And WotC revenue expected to drop 3 to 5% in 2024 compared to 23 overall. Although I heard two different numbers on this. One article said, I believe this was EN World, said it would be a drop of 3 to 5%. And then somewhere else, I want to say Dicebreaker, but I could be wrong, reported 7 to 12% drop in WotC revenue. I don't know which one's accurate, Shawn. I don't know if you have a...
I think we reported 7 to 12.
Okay, there you go.
Here's the important thing to know. In 10 months, Monopoly Go made $2 billion. The hobby game industry in 2023 made about 2.8. And that includes board games, role-playing games, card games, miniatures games, both collectible and non-collectible, card games, both collectible and non-collectible. So where do you think Hasbro is going to be looking to make up all of this lost thing? It's not going to be in D&D. Yes, they're going to do it, but that's where they're looking, as they probably should if they want to make money.
That was the sort of thing that I was coming to that I think is interesting, is the fact that they don't mention like any projected revenue gain or drop from the new edition rulebooks, releasing. They're not like, we can't wait till that player's handbook rakes in all the cash, none of that.
And I personally find that to be a sort of comforting thing. It means that, we don't have to expect a lot of money-motivated changes coming to D&D. I'm sure there will be some, Hasbro will want to make sure that their divisions are profitable no matter what. And D&D is still big there. But it's really clear from all of this that they see D&D not as a tabletop game, but as a brand overall. And that's it's backed up by the past 5 years of data. They've been spinning up D&D as a larger brand that, what's the word for it? A lifestyle brand that can be incorporated into every aspect of your personality. Whether it's the Converse you're wearing or the Lego sets you're building or the video games you're playing, they will find a way to put some D&D branding in there. And you'll want it because you like D&D, because you've done something else within the D&D brand ecosystem. As a cynic of capitalism, there's something about that makes my heart sink. But as someone who likes the D&D tabletop game and doesn't want to see it become a microtransaction-filled wasteland, that also makes me very happy, because I think the SRD crisis that happened last year has shown them that it's more trouble than it's worth to try and monetize that aspect of the brand, because we're all curmudgeons over here.
And some of us are curmudgeons who were once puddings.
But we can cast magic missiles, so it's okay.
Well, that being the news for this week, we made it. We made it to listener emails. Yay!
Woo!
And
Yay!
the community rejoiced. Woo! Dael, you seem so excited. What's the email address that people would send emails to?
They can send their emails to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
All over it, as Gethin did. And I think this is a great question. I also think it's a question that thematically links with what you were talking about before, Dael, with your sister, which is Gethin coming at it from a slightly different angle, but they're asking for advice about running games for strangers, especially in convention settings. The advice can be for new GMs, but also experienced GMs who may have only run for their home group and are moving into a more public space for the first time, such as volunteering to run games at a convention.
Do it. First of all, commit. Do it. It's good for you. It builds character. It builds lots of characters. I wouldn't be where I am today if I did not run games for strangers at conventions, hundreds, if not thousands. It's not going to go perfect every time. You are going to be learning. This is a learning process. You think you are a great DM, and maybe you are a great game master, but you will be put through your paces if you run games for strangers. Not necessarily in a bad way. It's not like there's, serial killers hanging out at every table. Maybe 5 or 10 over the course of your life, but that's beside the point. Learn from it. Learn from it. You will learn so much about gaming and dungeon mastering and storytelling from this. So do it.
Do it!
That is so well said. I have not run a ton of public games, unlike Shawn and Ben, but I have run a few. And those games that I did run at conventions for Kobold Press did all of those things. They made me realize that my style of DMing is really, really idiosyncratic. It's really specific to the games that I like to run and to the players who I like to have at my table. And so suddenly, to be thrown into a group whose expectations I didn't know or fully understand, there were some lucky smooth sections and there were some equally unlucky rough sections. If there's one thing I took away from that, it's do something to get to know the vibe of your group before you play. Yeah. And if you're running for a convention setting, you might not have all that much time to do that, right? You might, not only do you have a specific time slot, but those players, they came to play. They didn't come to answer your questionnaire. And they didn't have any time to fill one out online beforehand, right? They bought their ticket and they sat down. All right, let's go. So have something ready. Have something quick ready. You may over time develop your ability to read a table just like that, but if you have some way to do a session 0 in all of 5 minutes, that will serve you, that will make hours upon hours of time better.
Here's your session 0 for a table of strangers. Tell me about your character. See what they say. If they say, my character is the king of the dwarves and his battle clan is this and his battle song is this, there's the role player, right? There's the lore person. Talk to them when you're talking about lore. They will keep everyone else engaged. If the character says, I'm a 5th level knight, Gloomstalker rogue, and I can do 27,000 dice of damage each round, there's your power gamer. So focus on getting the monsters in front of that character so they can do their thing, right? It's the quick 5-minute session 0.
Definitely like talking to the group as they're showing up as well. Like players will often show up one at a time, or maybe 2 at a time if they're at a convention with a friend. And that period can feel a little awkward if you're like still setting up and they're sitting down and they're like, oh, what's the go? What's the vibe? And it's, talk to them. Just be like, hey, how's the convention going? Are you enjoying the convention? It's kind of weird. And I might approach it this way because I was a professional GM for a few years, but it's almost like a customer service role. And so like just being like, welcome into the shop, what is it? Not asking them like, what are you looking for directly, but just trying to ask like conversational questions about like, what else have you played at the convention? Is there something you're really looking forward to? Have you played a lot of 5e before? This is why I think it linked with Dael's kind of story earlier, is finding out who at the table has played a lot of the game before and who hasn't. So that you can kind of gauge how much explaining you might need to do of certain rules at different times, rather than just assuming that everybody's an expert and everybody knows how to play. And also, I think one of the big learnings for me is realizing that different people have fun with the game in different ways, and learning how your table is going to have fun. The way different players have fun might not be the way you enjoy D&D. Especially if you've only played it with your home group for a long time and you're all kind of simpatico with how you all enjoy the game, you're going to get at a table where suddenly it's all power gamers, or suddenly it's all guys who, like I had one table rock up and it was 2 guys who showed up and both of their characters' name was John, and they thought that was the most hilarious joke in the world, that they were both called John, or Johnson, I think it was. And they were kind of doing a Thompson and Thompson from Tintin gag where they would be like, oh, Johnson. I didn't think it was that funny. But letting them lean into that joke, and not being a stickler for how you like to play the game, because at that point, it's about facilitating the players' fun at a convention.
That seems like a you problem.
Time.
That's a hilarious joke.
Well, that's the point that I'm making, though, is like they're having fun and that's what's important. Like I'm not saying they were being problematic or anything like that.
You're just saying they weren't very funny.
Yeah. Basically. The other little bit of advice I would throw is if you have any control over the game that you're running, or the session that you're running, or the adventure is the word I'm looking for that you're running. Because sometimes at conventions you just get given an adventure and they tell you we're running this. Sometimes you might get asked to bring an adventure or choose one from a selection. The one thing I would say, and maybe this is a personal thing to me, James, Shawn, Dael, you might disagree. I would probably avoid anything at a convention that is not going to play well on the convention floor. I wouldn't go like deep horror on the convention floor expecting the players to buy into the deep horror of whatever adventure you're running. I wouldn't run some Greek tragedy that in your home game caused all the players at the table to cry, because that's not going to happen on a show floor, and it can fall a bit flat. I would pick something peppy, something fun, something engaging, something that's not too complicated, in terms of like the plot doesn't have 70 NPCs, has maybe 3 important NPCs, and kind of go with that, as opposed to something that's, a deep dive into a world or something.
One of the best convention games I ever played, because it fit my personal play style really well, was when I was still a writer for Geek and Sundry. And it kind of as a thank you for saying something very nice about one of Paizo's recent Pathfinder books, Heroes of Horror. Wes Schneider reached out to me and invited me to a little private game that he was running at PaizoCon that year. And so it was kind of the Pathfinder take on Ravenloft, whose name I can't quite remember now, but it was a very gothic, very emotive, highly sort of emotion and story and character driven, vibes driven session. And that only happened because it was in a private room upstairs, away from the hustle and bustle of the con floor, that atmosphere was able to be conjured. Which is to say that atmosphere can be conjured at a convention, but you really need to have something kind of special going on. Otherwise, if you can lean into the things that don't require atmosphere, like you were saying, Ben, things that are mechanical challenges, combat, puzzles, those are the two. Combat and puzzles, I think, is what comes to mind most immediately. If you can focus on those things, it's much easier to have a surefire hit.
And not to say that your adventure has to be glib or, comedic, or like the adventure that I ran at Conquest was a grim, hollow adventure. It did have a dramatic tone to it, but it wasn't trying to be the some deep, dark story exploration of the human condition.
All of this advice is really good, and all I could think this whole time is this metaphor that Shawn used of it. This is how you get put through your paces. And now I'm like, yeah, this is when you're a gigging musician going around to all the bars. This is when you're a comedian doing all of the rubbish stand-up venues. Yeah. And I'm just here like, I haven't paid my dues. And I'm very aware of it. So I have no actually good advice. The best I have is I have run on the fly. And for that, I think the best thing you can do, it's kind of like a magic trick, right? Like you're rigging the deck. You hand out pre-made characters where it's like, oh, one of you happens to be a ranger whose favorite enemy is dragons. Oh, that's interesting. And then, during the adventure, you find a single dragon slaying arrow. Isn't that interesting? And then at the end of the adventure, what's this that you're facing up against? It's a dragon. That's a really obvious example, but just like Pat's in chat said at some point, just slipping things into the pre-made characters that are going to come up in the adventure, but not making it obvious, not pointing it out to the players. Let them go, wait a minute, I have this thing. So the ranger actually isn't the best example, but you can slip those in and make the players feel really cool and smart when they kind of put the puzzle together.
If you can use pre-generated characters, you're golden. That's half the battle right there. If you know what players are bringing to the table. And the final thing, which goes along with what Dael is saying, is if you're running in a public venue, you probably have a time limit. So keep track of the time. Pace out the adventure beforehand. Write down in the margins if you need to, if the adventure doesn't do it for you. I have 30 minutes to do this. I have 25 minutes to do this. I have 45 minutes to do this. because then you won't be, well, we've got 5 minutes left and we still have the dragon encounter to go. And they didn't find the arrow, so I know it's not going to be over in one round. So I'm going to have to, you fight a dragon and you win. Oh, bye, everybody. That's no fun.
Definitely keeping an eye on the time is very important. And speaking of which, we didn't do a great job of it, but we're going to wrap this episode up because we are at time there. If you enjoyed the episode, you can email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com like Gethin did to ask us a question. Leave comments below, 5 stars, all that jazz really helps us out. Thumbs up, all the thing, whatever feeds your app, feed it to it and we will get it. Check out the Wandering Tavern. If you support that through the link that we provided, that also supports the Lorecast directly. It's a really cool project. And we will be back next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Monday. If you're in Australia, it's 9 a.m. on the Tuesday. I've been Ben Byrne here with James Hagshaw-Mill and Dael Kingsmill. We'll catch you all next week. See you then.
Bye-bye.
I'm bringing it back.
You're the one who killed it. What do you mean?
I supported you in your choices.
You said that. You were the one.
I'm not going to carry this weight.
We need to go back to the paint stream. I
didn't save the paint stream. All right.
Bye.
If you're in Perth, I have no idea, Pats, but I don't know. Check the clock in your local town hall.
Check the clock in your local town hall.